The sky that morning was a strange color, tinged with fire and sorrow. I was sharpening my father's old sword when the alarm bell clanged, and by the time I reached the hill, I saw it, our village burning, our longships smoldering like dead dragons on the shore. They came in the mist, silent, swift, and merciless. By nightfall, I was no longer a fisherman's son but the lone survivor of Bjornhaven. My name is Eric, and this is how vengeance became my only reason to breathe. I buried my mother beside the sea, where she used to sing as she folded nets. Her hands had always smelled of salt and lavender. When I held them in death, they were cold, stiff, foreign. That day, I swore on her grave, I would find the raiders. I would make them remember Bjornhaven. But vengeance is a fire, it can warm you or consume you. At 16, I didn't know the difference. Old Thrain, the village blacksmith, found me scavenging iron from the ruins. "Building ghosts, are we?" he asked, eyebrow raised. I didn't answer. Instead of stopping me, he handed me tools. "A longship won't build itself," he muttered. That was the first time someone believed in my madness and my mission. It taught me that sometimes, a spark from someone else can keep your own fire alive. We built through the seasons. The longship, carved from oak and ash, was lean and hungry. I named her Raffenblood, Raven's Blood. Her prow bore a raven's skull, painted with my mother's ash. As I hammered her final nail, I realized, vengeance gave me purpose, but building gave me strength. Every plank was a prayer. Every scar on my hand, a chapter. Finding warriors was easy, there's no shortage of men with ghosts. I promised them a chance to face theirs. And they followed. A scarred archer who lost his wife. A mute giant whose village had vanished. We weren't a crew. We were a storm waiting to be named. And I? I was the wind, ready to blow our grief into something the world would fear. We set sail under a red moon. First target, a small outpost where the raiders traded stolen goods. We struck at dawn, swift and brutal. No war cries, no mercy. It wasn't justice. It was rage, sharpened into steel. And yet, when the battle ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Like the sea had swallowed a piece of me I didn't know I could lose. Among the ruins, I found a boy clinging to a dog, trembling. His face reminded me of mine, not yesterday's, but before the fire. He didn't speak. Just stared. I gave him my last piece of bread. He gave me a lesson. Vengeance doesn't protect the innocent, it leaves them behind. And sometimes, saving one soul means more than avenging 100. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled like my mother's scream. I looked at my hands, red, not from honor but from hate. I wondered, had I become what I sought to destroy? I didn't know the answer, but the storm inside me was growing louder than the one outside. At Skoll's Hold, we were ambushed. Someone had leaked our path. I lost 2 men, good men. I later found out it was Rurik, a quiet oarsman who sold our plan for silver. I gave him a choice, jump or fight me. He jumped. That was the moment I learned trust is the rarest weapon, sharper than a blade, but just as deadly when it breaks. An old seeress lived alone on an island covered in ravens. "You seek vengeance," she said, "but you wear grief like armor." She showed me a vision, me standing over the raiders' leader, victorious, but alone, aged, hollow-eyed. "Vengeance steals more than it gives," she whispered. I laughed then. I wouldn't laugh later. I found an old parchment and wrote to my mother. Not because she'd read it, but because I needed her to hear me. I told her I missed her laugh, that her soup always tasted better than I admitted, and that I was tired. Writing that letter was harder than any battle. It reminded me that love, not hate, was why I started this. Finally, we tracked them, the Red Wolf clan. Same red fangs on their shields, same serpent tattoos. My heart beat like war drums. We watched their camp from the cliffs. They laughed, sang, lived. The same way we once did. Suddenly, they weren't monsters. They were men. Men who took everything from me. We attacked at twilight. I found their leader, Kale the Red. He was bigger than I imagined, but older too. Slower. We fought like legends. Steel clashed, blood flew. And when I stood over him, sword raised, I saw fear in his eyes, not of death, but of me. That's when I realized, I had become someone else's monster. I spared him. Tied him. Made him watch his camp burn, but I didn't kill him. My crew was furious. "He took your life," one shouted. "He took my past," I replied. "But I'll choose my future." It wasn't weakness, it was strength. The kind that rebuilds, not destroys. Kale told me of his own losses, his son killed by Norsemen, his wife burned by invaders. We both lost, he said. For the first time, I saw the full circle of revenge. No one wins. Just echoes of loss and new graves. I sailed home, not to a village, but to the memory of one. The stones where my house stood were overgrown. But the sea still sang. I scattered the ashes I'd carried, the last from my ship's bow. It was time to stop sailing for ghosts. I began building again, not a warship, but a trader. I named her Freya, which means peace. My crew? Farmers, smiths, even the boy and his dog. They taught me that life after vengeance is not only possible, it's worth fighting for. Years later, we held a feast to honor the fallen, not just ours, but all. No tales of glory, just truth. When a child asked me what I'd done during the war, I said, I learned that swords can end lives, but choices shape them. A raven landed on my ship's mast one evening. Just sat there, watching the waves. It reminded me of Raffenblad and the fire that once burned in me. But this time, I didn't see vengeance in its eyes. I saw guidance. Peace. My mother would have smiled. Now, I tell my story not to glorify revenge, but to warn against it. Let my path be a lesson, not a blueprint. For in chasing shadows, you may lose the light. But if you build with love, you'll always find your way home. Moral of the story, vengeance may drive the heart, but only forgiveness and purpose can heal it. Choose to build, not burn, for even in ruin, a new future waits to be carved.